then we have the exact same story coming through from a study that is done inside of the States. Basically, they've been picking up a lot of dolphin deaths, not just washed up dolphins, but washed up baby dolphins. And you know, the level and intensity and frequency of these kind of stories are becoming more and more and more commonplace. A study was done, and now you and I would think that this should be fairly common knowledge, but this study was so necessary, and it was completed, and the study basically highlighted that it is not possible for us to live or cohabit this planet with the focus of everything that we do focused on growth. So now that sounds kind of normal to me and you, but this study is what's going to be a bacteria that is found inside of the bees, and the bees are in fact starting to die out in their droves, not because necessarily environmental toxicity, which is your GMO stuff, Roundup, all that kind of stuff, but also because of shifting climate. Shifting climate is actually changing various different fungals and bacteria that the bees naturally have, which is a big problem. So now even Einstein said, you know, if you lose your bees, the world will end shortly thereafter, because bees are a key corner species. On Wednesday, a story came out about the impact of fin harvesting on sharks, and how it was decimating the oceans by wiping out apex predators. But then also the very next day, a story was released about how in Malaysia they are taking fishing and illegal fishing so seriously that they are confiscating boats and blowing them up to make reefs. And so far they were saying they've done something like 64 boats they've confiscated off illegal fishermen, and they sink them. They don't ask questions. They don't, you know, there's no big court battles. They get the people off the boat, they drag the boat to their nearest reef, and they blow it up. And you're going to see more and more of this happening, because people are starting to realize the impact that we're having on the ocean. Now, let's not forget that this week is International Recycling Week. So obviously, in that line, you had a lot of stories coming out that are related to the levels of plastic in the oceans. You're having stories coming out in relation to the kind of lifespan that plastics have while they're sitting in the environment. And you know, we already picked up that story from late last week in relation to how the volume of plastic in the sea is outnumbering sea life something like 4-1. And the worst part is that even should the plastic break down, so they're quantifying it by, say, the level of output given from a land area, but so even if you were to break down the big bottles, and it's the actual microparticles that are getting into the oceans that are causing a lot of the difficulties. And you know, this is becoming more and more of a problem. People don't recycle. People continue to manufacture waste in everything, pretty much everything that we do. So if you summarize all of those kind of stories, you take a look at the bees, where first of all we were causing colony collapse with the use of pesticides. And then in addition to those pesticides, it was actually nicotine-based pesticides, which of course was a product of Monsanto. Thank you, Monsanto, for screwing up another thing. And then you take a look at the amphibians, that because of our impact on the environment, the amphibians are starting to feel the impacts and are wiping out. And then the increase of copper in the water from mining activities, from, you know, our impact is starting to show more and more. Now, if you are a person that's just tuned to this channel, the only awareness you would have of any of this would be that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders had a massive argument on a debate in New York about who's going to become the next president. And also you would have been aware about various terrorism blasts around the world. But because you're now tuned to this, you can actually start to see that around you, the real story of what is happening to this planet is not based upon what Bernie Sanders is doing or whether Vladimir Putin was picked up in the Panama Papers. The real story is that around you, the environment is absolutely collapsing. It's collapsing. And we're not talking about it. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to talk about it. We're trying to bring it to your attention, and we're trying to make it viable for you.
Project would work, where they would come and negotiate because they'd have an agenda. They want to come in here and they want to start a AIDS orphanage or something like that. They would go to the chief and they'd say to the chief, we want to start up an AIDS orphanage and we want to try and employ some people and educate some people, and we want to take care of all your AIDS orphans, and for that we want some land. And the chief would think about it seriously, and he would feel important and say, yes, it's a good idea, we need these things. And there would be this trade-off, but in a way the project would then be beheld to the chief, whereas we kind of came through the back door here. Firstly, because I came in here with a preconceived idea that this whole tribal system or traditional system was flawed anyway, and it failed. So I came in here with kind of really a judgment against this whole traditional system and things like that. You know, from what I'd heard, which is really unfair, but that's how I came in here. I sort of touched a little bit on what Contra Lesser, which is the Concrete Traditional Leaders, was all about, and it looked dodgy. In a sense, it was quite rude. I should have gone to the great place of this specific council and said, I'm here to do this. The other thing was, having worked in the Transkei before, worked in many other countries in Africa as well, is that you sort of also believe in the bush telegraph. And I sort of thought, well, what I'm doing, if it's important enough, then somebody will hear about it and they'll come and find me and say, let's meet, sort of thing, which didn't happen. So either the bush telephone didn't get there, or I just haven't been doing enough important stuff really at that level. So what that did for the project anyway was, I think, was quite beneficial in that journey of understanding what these problems are all about, because we didn't have to work to anybody's agenda, or had to deliver anything to anybody. While I was busy, not sure what I was really doing, just building this island in the middle of this place that I wasn't familiar with, having never been as close to the coast. I'd worked up in Ngcobo and places like that several years before. To put in a relatively self-sustainable place and hoping that people would just be flocked and would just feel there's some kind of magnetic pull to this place, and we could teach people how to eat and to respect water and soil, and building and things like that, and get their houses stronger, which was really naive of me, I think, in hindsight. I think people are used to being herded in a way, and they just didn't. So they thought, in order to engage with me, they'd have to pay me. In other words, if they want to come and make bricks, they'd have to pay me to do that, which was never in my mind, but I didn't articulate that very well, I think. So all this time I'm busy developing these gardens, I'm busy building these buildings, and sorting out these water issues and things like that. And at the same time, I'm watching it collapse around me on the greater scale. The municipality falling to pieces, the water systems falling to pieces, understanding how that's affected the whole dynamics of the community. Because I'm living inside this place and I'm seeing, and I've done this before in other places in other parts of Africa, but never with such a social dysfunctionality, which is what we've got here. So watching people's buildings fall down, and not jumping in these things and trying to save everybody, but just saying, well, tough. You know, you don't, until you decide to integrate, it's what's going to happen. Of course, because what then, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but this main chief who was head of Contra Lesser, who I was working with, died, and left this huge void suddenly that we had started, which was about leadership. And he completely saw things the way that I saw things, of understanding that present leadership was flawed, and had to be nurtured, and then to start focusing on the next leadership, the children, and to create leadership schools for these guys to come through so we can start to shift the whole thing around. Everything is based on oil. Yeah. our monetary system, our judicial system, our education systems, everything on this table. Well, this is now second generation, so that's now no longer oil required. But that's our existence. Oil comes crash. I mean, we see it. I mean, yesterday, the Dow Jones fell another 3.5% yesterday. You know, you look across the board, the American markets, it's just red. They just crashed. Oil organizations went down 4 to 5%. They're just coming crashing down, and it's happening every day. They're totally overinflated because they're based on where they think the oil reserves are, not where the oil, because everybody's overselling their oil. They're saying, oh no, we've got loads of it still, because they don't want to create panic. We're into these long wars now. I mean, when you've got a country like America that's a net importer of oil, when they produce, I think about 2 to 3, not even 2% probably anymore, of the world's oil. But they use 25% of the world's oil. I mean, they have to control the world. The economy is based on it. They have to control the world's oil, which means they have to be in war. So that's what's going to go on. I mean, it's not going to stop. The only thing that's going to stop it, when there's no more oil to put in the ship, the HSS Indomitable or whatever it's called, to get it across the ocean anymore, that's when it's all going to come grinding to a halt. So we go back to this governance you're talking about. It's all based on central control. But what happens when that central control is broken? The most recent example of that happening was when Katrina went into New Orleans. And it cut off, in the first world country, okay, it cut off Washington, D.C. And within hours, people turned on people. Shops were pillaged. Next thing, people just turned on people. Okay, and that's what happens when there's chaos, when there's no more control, there's no one. So now, in a third world or developing country, when suddenly that power line is cut, it's going to be mayhem. Unless we can shift it, and we can get people and communities, let's call them transition, whatever we want to call them, all these words have been banning around, where they are taking care of themselves. Where they're not reliant upon the central system of control, which is money. And so it's something that's gone. You see, in our conditioning, and we are so conditioned, we have become codependent, where we depend upon each other. And this is really it's a disease. If we use which I do often, I use an analogy of a forest. And we see these forests where they're codependent, where the trees cross over each other and they stop the flow of air through each other, and they stop the growth. And we've seen it here. There's so much evasive stuff comes in. But if you look at a forest that each tree stands strong on its own, and then as a collective, it's incredibly strong. It's a strong, healthy environment. And it's a three-dimensional living thing then. And if we can create that where people can stand strong on their own as individuals, and then unbelievable, the fear and the obsession with death and the amount of resources that get put into death and this dignity in death, but where's the dignity in life? And that's what we need to be focusing on, is that every moment that we have this gift of living, and let's make it count. Let's be authentic. But we all put our belief in old mutual and funeral schemes for our death, so we can be remembered. But these guys who have they throw these huge parties. They spent their life beating their wives, abusing their children. But they had this incredible funeral, man. It was huge. You should have seen it. Strong Muti there. No. It's disgraceful. Let's put that dignity into life now. And I really do believe that in this religion that existed before we came along with this whole sort of Christianity trip and things like that, was this incredible dynamic relationship between the earth and the people in Africa. You know, they call it Kwamata or something like that, and it's brilliant. It's so naive. It's brilliant. It's not counterbalance. It's just based in love and respect. And you know, if you respect the sun for rising, for setting, you respect the seasons. You show respect to the animal you kill to nurture yourself. You respect your spouse or your kids. Or, you know, suddenly here come these guys and saying, no, hold on, you guys are savages unless you bow down to this figure here. That's it. You're going to go and die a miserable death in hell and things like it. And how could people come here with anything but love anyway? Because that's all we believe in is love. Okay, so this is how people are building here. People without much means, which is called a wattle and daub. So here you've got your wattle, which is your wooden framework, and then they're packing in the daub, which is the clay, in here. Now, historically, this is a brilliant way to build. I mean, a lot of your Tudor houses in the United Kingdom, which we're using cements and things like that because it's practical and it gives it longevity. Now, if you go into some of your sort of Central American, Santa Fe, those sort of areas, for them, which they use the adobe blocks, which is also just sort of sun-dried bricks, clay bricks. For them to come once a year, and the woman would come and they would repair the cracks because they're also very. You fill this with your mix, okay, with a very little bit amount of water, and then you'll put this on it, and you'll push it down, which is your primary compaction. All right. Then take that over, and then this is where you'll notice the bottom is coming up. Yes. So it's compacting from the bottom. There's your compaction. Alright, so it's compacting up. Up it goes, and it pops the brick out, which would be up there now. 2 people could make a brick every 17 seconds. Yeah. But you get machines now that can do 12 bricks at once, doing the same. But the nice thing about it is that, as opposed to the machines that can make 1,500 bricks a day, there's a huge effect on the environment, where you're actually getting, I mean, that's a hungry machine. And where you're getting that material from. Whereas this here, it's more hand. You can use the foundations of your building to build the walls up. It doesn't have to have such a negative effect on the environment. They're not fully set yet, so I don't want to mess with them too much. So it's 240 mils long, and it's 100 high, and it's 140 wide, which from an engineering perspective is perfect for a wall. You can support a roof with this lightweight roof, and it'll be fine. This is going to set for about 3 weeks. This digester, which I designed, it's a closed bag. Well, it's got an inlet and an outlet and a gas outlet. So it's made from reinforced PVC, which is the same material as you'll make a jumping castle from, and it's shaped. The shape of it is like a loaf of bread. It's risen, so it has the convex top on it, and everything else is squared. It fits into this frame here that I just built with brick. And how it works is it comes from the toilets. The waste comes into the. I can also feed it with green material, which produces most of. If I really want to get a lot of push my my methane levels up, I'll feed it with some bananas or stuff like that, which boosts it. It comes in here, and inside here I have a live culture, which is anaerobic, which means that it exists without oxygen. Okay, so it's the digestion process is anaerobic as opposed to aerobic, which is like your composting loos and things like this. So the microbes that exist inside here break down the waste very, very efficiently, and the energy that comes out of that is the methane gas. Now, if you can smell, Judy, which it's almost a composty smell. There's not necessarily a sewage smell, but there's a slight composty smell. If you come close down here, you could almost smell. You could smell the gas as well, which is when you burn it, there's no smell whatsoever. Again, it's a composty one. It's not necessarily unpleasant. We'll fill this with green material, with anything, and we'll just get some water and shove it down. It's a big stomach. That's how it really works. There's enzymes that are breaking down the material inside there. and from that they create methane gas, and they create high nutrient water. Now there have been sort of many household biodigestion systems that are coming out. There are about 6 cubic meters prefabricated systems that cost probably about 35,000-40,000 rands. And they're not high gas yielding, but what they are doing is they're breaking down the water, the black water, the effluent water, which is really critical. And so therefore the principles are very much along these lines. This is just a bit more rudimentary. And so from here the water will go through a sand filter, which is what this is, which we've got. Obviously there's high nutrients in here. We've still got about 5 to 7% pathogens, which is your E. coli, etc., coming into here, which then these plant life will take it out. So it'll come into here, it will filtrate down through a slow sand filter. Underneath here, about a meter down, there's a hole, and it'll come up here, which this is full of shells like this, and charcoal, which then absorb the last remnants of pathogens. Okay, that's what this one, and the reeds, of course, as well, take out anything. So it's we really have removed as much. I mean, if there's anything left, it's absolute trace elements. The water will gather in here and settle, and then will slowly gravitate down through our trees and our orchards, which are down that side, which is high nutrient water, which you can drink. It'll give you a bit of a stomach ache because it's high in nutrients, but certainly nothing poisonous. And but it's very good for growth of the trees and plants. We've got coffee trees down there and a loquat tree, and we're definitely seeing pronounced growth as to the other trees that we have around here that are not enjoying these high nutrients that we're getting out of here. So ultimately what you'd like to have is, say, 3 or 4 houses together, all the waste leading into a digester, which then would lead into an orchard, oranges or whatever, which would then go to provide food for the house, provide the energy for the gas, as well as, most importantly in my mind, is processing the black water and not getting it into the waterways, which is critical. So we've got our dam over there where the water collects. All right, it's about 120,000 litres of water. We've got our fish inside there as well, which is a source of protein. And we feed the garden with that water as well, which then all slopes back into the dam slowly. From there the water is pumped up through to the storage tank, but it goes through a filtration process first, and then we can put in a solar pump to pump it up to it's a 5,000 litre storage tank. The water is then, there's pipes going around down into the kitchen. From the kitchen it's processed through the food. The food is then processed through our bodies, which is then through to the toilet, which then comes down through the digester, through the filtration, back into the gardens, and ultimately back into the dam. And it's a closed cycle, which we have now interrupted. We've taken from it, but now we've also put back the byproduct, which has helped our plant life growth, and it's given us energy. We're obviously going through transition now into winter, so we're getting our celeries going, our beetroots, carrots, things like that, lettuces, which this is quite a warm climate, so the lettuces don't always do that well in the hotter climates. We also do have some shade houses here as well to protect them through the summer. We've got our pigeon peas as well, plus all our herbs and that. And then we go all the way down where we've got our ground covers. This is what we can call an aerated bed. It's off the ground. We've got green material at the very bottom, which is composting, and then we've got which is a long nutrient release bed, which is like a double dug bed, and then above it we've got layers where we've got decomposing materials at various stages, plus cow manure. That's very rich if you look at that. If we look around here, of course, sod's law, we won't find any, but there's worms everywhere as well that are working away. Perhaps if we look in one of the other ones, and then we cover that all up. Right now, because it's winter, we have quite a bit of dew, and and this mulch here is holding that water because we're in drought now. Is holding that water on the ground. Plus the kind of growth here, we've got corianders and cresses which are low onto the ground and not using up too much of the precious nutrients. But this is where we have problems, where we have invasive plants like this guavadilla, which just comes on and takes over.
But it does produce fruit that you eat.
It produces fruit, but it stops the oxygen from getting to these plants. So this needs to be managed a bit. In this garden here, we've got not just fruit that's for eating, but it's to attract other insects that eat aphids and things like that, like the marigold, which is quite diverse. Turtles take out the small fish to try and keep the population down a bit. You can see that each rice has its own little, each grain of rice, there's a little sheath that exists in. Here's your grain of rice. Our food production has been up about 20 to 30% since we've had the bees here. We were getting some bees still before we put the hive here from the forest, but this hive is about 6-7 months old now and is very, very active. We've already put the second super on the top. So the super is where our honey lives. So the big box at the bottom is the bees' honey, where the queen lives, and then above there is where when that's full, they move up, and that's when we harvest our honey. So the middle one is now full, and the top one is half full now. And what we'll do is, as we go into winter now, the activity will be less and less, and we'll put on one more super, I think, and then we'll harvest the honey probably in the springtime. So now we're not just looking at some kind of one-dimensional garden. We're taking it to all different, and we're utilizing all of it, and we're rotating them all the time, and then also protecting them through the winter months. So it's just being conscious, but certainly there's a lot less energy is put into this garden as it develops more and more and more, and nature is allowed to do her thing, which is what's really exciting about it. And it truly, I do believe in about 2 years' time, it will be a food forest.
We have planted millions of seeds in minds and hearts that are sprouting consciousness around what we are doing, what we need to do, and how we can save ourselves from, as my good friend Kumi Naidoo, one of my heroes and the first African head of Greenpeace, says, we are sleepwalking into a disaster of unmitigated proportion, where our children and theirs will pay the price of our greed, our ignorance, and our inability to change. Yet people around the world are realizing this. If William Kamkwamba, a 14-year-old Malawian, can build a working wind turbine, first to power his own house and then eventually his whole village, then surely the rest of us can find some solutions. There's a fabulous book on this young man called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and he's now an MIT student. China leading the way in the manufacture and installation of wind turbines. Nearly 3/4 of all of their clean energy investments are now wind. And in the United States, wind power has been the largest source of renewable electricity for the last several years. But there's also an incredible future for solar. The market is now growing at about 7 times the predicted pace. Did you know that every single hour, enough solar energy hits the Earth to meet the world's energy demands for a year? And here in South Africa, we have all of this available to us. And in North Africa, this ambitious supergrid hopes to take solar energy not just down to sub-Saharan Africa, but into Europe as well. Geothermal power plants, amazing. They harness the heat of the earth to provide clean energy. And here, Iceland's leading the way. In China, every single person has to plant 3 trees every single year. And in India, massive school programs as we do here. The time for action is right now. So folks, whilst most of our governments are MIA and corporate greed continues to rape and pillage planet's resources, and many slumber on unconsciously, can we here at Sustain Our Africa agree? We are the change agents, and together we can make the necessary changes to avoid more suffering so that we can have enough for all forever.
My name is Marcus Asner, and I'm a lawyer in New York. From 2000 to 2009, I was a federal prosecutor in Manhattan, and I prosecuted, among other things, the Arnold Benjes rock lobster and Patagonian toothfish case.
And in your country, do you get a lot of cases that are where the fisheries crimes?
We get some, and yes, we have a pretty robust enforcement network. The Lacey Act is really, I think, I'd like to say it's the envy of the world, and that.
Can you describe it?
Sure. What it is it makes it a crime. It does a number of things, but what it does is it makes it a crime to import into the United States fish, wildlife, and timber that's been harvested in violation of local law. And that local law can include the law of a foreign country, for example.
And James Benjes was prosecuted under that?
He was prosecuted under the Lacey Act, under conspiracy to violate the Lacey Act, and smuggling, and then smuggling is a substantive violation as well.
Okay. Do you find this is quite effective in preventing corruption in the States?
I wouldn't say it's so much effective in preventing corruption. I think what it is effective in doing is allowing us to use the federal criminal system to help prosecute and investigate instances where people are trying to take advantage of borders to import into areas things that have been harvested in violation of other jurisdictions' laws. And that itself is a very, very powerful tool.
Do you find, as a legal professional, is your main motivation because you enjoy the legality of it, and that, or is your main motivation that in this case you're actually doing something for the planet?
I think I'm probably shallower than all of that. When I was a prosecutor, I just wanted to go get the bad guys. And it didn't really matter to me whether it was a fish case or a narcotics case or a major white-collar fraud. I just liked pulling together the material, investigating the hell out of it, and taking down the bad guys.
Do you worry about what's happening to the planet, or doesn't it come past your door very often?
Yeah, I do worry about it. And look, I mean, I gave you a very shallow answer a moment ago. Of course I worry about it. And you know, one of the nice things about being a prosecutor, particularly in the United States and particularly in the Southern District of New York, is you really fundamentally believe that you wear the white hat and that your job is to protect those who need protection from bad guys. And in the instance of the Benjes case, we had the added advantage of really setting a precedent that does help protect the planet.
In 1988, that's when we had Bill Molson, the founder of permaculture, who came from Australia. He held a workshop in Botswana on permaculture, and two of our guys, who are now our trustees, went to attend the workshop. And then after the workshop, that's when they turned this farm into a training center. And their main focus was permaculture. Permaculture means permanent agriculture, but it can be defined in many ways. Some say it's an approach to designing system which will give sustainable rewards. Right now, as permaculture is growing up, we are now slowly getting into urban communities. We use natural resources for the production of our crops. Like for instance, for soil improving, we use this type of composting. We just harvest fresh cow dung, and then we put it in this container, we perforate it, and then put the dung in, and then introduce worms. After a period of 3 months, the worms will be doing the decomposition. They will be decomposing the stuff, and then after 3 months it will be ready. Then we take it and then put it in sieves. We mix with sand and then pot it. Then after those 3 months, the worms will be in abundance, and we could use them for feeding our poultry. and the extra we can take it for fishing or for fishing or for selling, or we could introduce them in the garden. Because there will be in abundance. Nature is working for us.
Okay.
Sure. And then this system is called the container garden. It's ideal for those people who are residing in flats, who doesn't have where to do the cultivation. You just fill in an old sack with compost and a bit of soil. Then you perforate it and then you plant your vegetables. You're home and dry. And if you think of going for a holiday resort somewhere, just take it and then put it at the back of your truck. Then you'll be having fresh vegetables with you. These are herbs. Herbs are used in various ways. Some are used for culinary, some has got medicinal properties, some are used as repellents if planted with vegetables. For instance, we have this one. It's called Nasturtium. Some use it as just a flower, but it has got more properties than just being a flower. We use it to deworm our livestock. It's very, very, very useful. And for human beings, if you have got upset stomach, take the flowers and then chew them. And medicinal uses again. You could use it for whooping cough, you could use it for bronchitis, you could use it for headaches, or for boosting up one's immune system. If one, especially those, it could be AIDS victims, if they take this one, it helps them to boost their immune system, benefiting the neighbor. It could be, in this case, it could be spinach. The nitrogen that is left by this bean is taken by the spinach, right? And at the same time, if I've got an outbreak of a certain disease, if that disease attacks spinach, at least you are left with beans. But if you've got just a field of spinach, if that disease comes, it wipes away everything and you are left with nothing. Those are the advantages of diversifying. And at the same time, we encourage farmers to cover the soil. The reason being that if the soil is covered, there is little runoff. And at the same time, there is much percolation. The temperature of the soil remains constant when the soil is covered.